The night was dark, and the wind howled across the lonely island. Shovels struck something solid in the earth, not rock, but wood. That sound, on a stormy night in 1795, ignited a treasure hunt that has never stopped. This is the story of the Oak Island Money Pit, one of the world's greatest and most expensive historical mysteries. For over 200 years, this single hole in the ground has consumed fortunes, claimed lives, and defied every attempt to solve it. You are about to unravel the entire epic, from the first curious discovery to the high-tech searches of today. You will learn how a simple pit became a labyrinth of booby-traps, who might have built it, and why after centuries we still cannot look away. What is buried so deep that someone would engineer an entire island to protect it? And what does this endless quest say about us? If you had invested your entire life into this search, what would you be hoping to find? The boy's name was Daniel McGinnis, and he was just 16 years old. Exploring the then sparsely inhabited Oak Island, he came across something that did not belong. In a small clearing stood a single ancient oak tree, its limbs gnarled by Atlantic storms, and from one thick branch a worn ship's pulley block was hanging, swaying gently in the salt breeze. Directly beneath it, the earth had sunk into a perfect circular depression about 12 feet across. It looked as if the ground itself had been waiting for him. Daniel did not hesitate. He ran to fetch his two closest friends, John Smith and Anthony Vaughan, and they returned with shovels and a determination that would echo for centuries. This was not a random hole. As they dug, they quickly uncovered a pattern, a deliberate and chilling design. Just 2 feet down, their shovels scraped against a layer of carefully laid flagstones, flat stones that were not native to that part of the island. Removing them, they kept digging, only to hit a solid platform of thick oak logs at 10 feet. They pried the logs away, finding only more soil, but then at 20 feet, another identical platform of oak. And then at 30 feet, another. Between these stubborn barriers, they found layers of a strange, putty-like clay, and even traces of charcoal, as if from a long, cold fire. With every few feet of progress, the boys were not just digging into dirt, they were descending a man-made ladder. Each oak platform was a sealed hatch, and each layer of foreign material was a signature. This was engineered. Someone, long ago, had gone to extraordinary lengths to bury something here, and then to make sure no one could ever get it back out easily. The sheer effort implied a treasure so valuable it was worth this monumental labor. In that simple pit on a quiet island, a template was set. The mystery of Oak Island was born not from a map or a rumor, but from the physical, undeniable evidence of human ingenuity and secrecy. Every expedition that followed, no matter how advanced, would be chasing the ghost of that first discovery, trying to answer the question those 3 teenagers asked with every shovelful of earth: what lies beneath the next layer? The boys' discovery was just the beginning of a much deeper puzzle. As the 19th century dawned, new groups of treasure seekers formed, drawn by the growing legend of the pit. They called themselves syndicates, pooling their money and their hopes to tackle the engineering nightmare. One of these early companies, the Onslow Company, returned to the original shaft in 1803. They managed to reach an incredible depth of 90 feet, and there, their augers, a type of drilling tool, brought up something extraordinary. Mixed with the clay and wood chips was a small, torn piece of parchment. It was a fragile, tantalizing whisper from the depths, but that was not the most famous find from that level. According to later accounts, the workers also pulled up a flat stone slab, roughly 2 feet long and 1 foot wide, which became known as the 90-foot stone. This was no ordinary rock. Its surface was inscribed with a series of strange, cryptic symbols. To the workers, it looked like a message, a code left by the original depositors. For decades, the stone was said to have been used as a fireplace hearth in a local home, its symbols slowly blackened by soot. Then, in the 1860s, a professor reportedly examined it and produced a translation. The symbols, he claimed, spelled out a sentence in plain English: 40 feet below, 2 million pounds are buried. If true, this was not just a clue, it was a direct instruction and a staggering promise. It told searchers exactly where to look and exactly what they would find, a fortune worth many millions in today's money. This translation cemented the stone's place as the single most important artifact in the Oak Island story. But here is where the mystery deepens into controversy. The original 90-foot stone vanished without a trace in the early 20th century. No clear photograph of it exists, only drawings made from memory. The professor's translation has been fiercely debated, with other cipher experts proposing wildly different interpretations of the symbols, from Masonic codes to simple stonemasons' marks. Skeptics argue the whole story might be a later invention, a piece of folklore that attached itself to the legend. Yet its power is undeniable. Whether real or imagined, the 90-foot stone became a cornerstone of the Oak Island mythos. It transformed the pit from a simple hole with wooden platforms into a deliberate, intelligent construct. It suggested the builders were not just hiding treasure, they were communicating with whoever was clever enough to break their code. This idea that the entire island is a giant puzzle box waiting to be solved is the engine that has driven every major expedition since. The stone promised that the madness had a method and that a colossal reward awaited those who could decipher it. But the promise of the 90-foot stone came with a terrible price. The Onslow Company, formed in 1804, was the first organized syndicate to confront the pit's true nature. They returned to the original shaft, determined to push past the wooden platforms and reach the treasure they now believed lay just 10 feet below where their drill had found the parchment. Their method was brutally simple: dig straight down, shoring up the shaft with timber as they went. For months, the rhythmic sound of picks and shovels filled the air as they descended past 60, then 70, then 80 feet. The work was exhausting and dangerous, but hope drove them deeper into the earth. Then, around 90 feet, the character of the pit changed. It was no longer just a hole, it revealed itself as a machine. As they broke through another oak platform, a low, ominous rumble echoed up the shaft. Within minutes, salt water began bubbling up from below, rising with terrifying speed. The men scrambled for the surface as their excavation, their months of backbreaking labor, filled with the cold Atlantic Ocean. They had not hit a natural spring. They had triggered a flood tunnel, a cleverly engineered channel dug from the pit's bottom out to the island's shoreline, designed to drown any intruder. This was no accident of geology, it was a booby trap of breathtaking sophistication. Yet, in the chaos, a moment of pure, agonizing temptation occurred. Before the water made further work impossible, the men lowered a simple iron crowbar on a rope, probing the murky bottom. The bar struck something solid, which they described as a chest, its corners distinct. Pushing harder, the bar broke through what felt like wood and then plunged into a cavity, striking loose metal that shifted and clinked with a sound unmistakable to any ear: the jingle of coins. For a fleeting instant they had touched it. Treasure was real and it was right there, just beyond their grasp, but the ocean would not let it go. Every pump they could muster was useless against the relentless flow from the flood tunnels. The Onslow Company was bankrupted not by a lack of fines, but by the pit's brilliant, cruel defense system. Their failure established the central paradox of Oak Island: the closer you get to the prize, the more violently the island itself fights back. They proved the treasure existed, but they also proved that retrieving it would be a war of attrition against an ingenious, 200-year-old mine. Defeated but not destroyed, the mystery only grew more elaborate. Decades after the Onslow Company's watery failure, a new syndicate arrived with fresh capital and a new strategy. The Truro Company, formed in 1849, decided to stop fighting the water and start understanding it. If the pit was flooding from the sea, they reasoned they needed to find the source. Their investigation led them away from the main shaft to a quiet, sandy inlet on the island's eastern shore known as Smith's Cove. There, beneath the ordinary-looking beach, they uncovered the true genius and the true scale of the Oak Island trap. At low tide, they removed layers of sand and beach stones to reveal a man-made marvel. The entire cove was an artificial filter. First, they found a thick, water-resistant mat of a strange, fibrous material, later identified as coconut fiber imported from the tropics. Beneath that was a latticework of carefully laid eelgrass, a natural sieve, and below that the stunning core of the system, a network of 5 stone-lined channels, each about 8 inches wide, that fanned out like the fingers of a hand. These were the legendary box drains. They sloped gently from the high tide line inland, converging into a single, larger channel that snaked its way across the island, directly toward the money pit over 500 feet away. This was not a simple pipe, it was a hydraulic engine. At high tide, seawater would percolate down through the coconut fiber and eelgrass, which filtered out sand and debris, then flow cleanly into the stone drain. The converging channels would create a pressurized stream that shot through the main tunnel, relentlessly pumping the Atlantic Ocean into the bottom of the treasure shaft. The flooding was not a flaw, it was the entire point. The Truro Company had exposed the beating heart of the island's defense, a system that required a profound understanding of hydraulics, geology, and long-term planning. It was an engineering project that would have taken a large, skilled workforce months, if not years, to complete. Whoever did this was not a random band of pirates, they were architects. Emboldened by this discovery, the company returned to the main pit, now determined to outsmart the system they had mapped. They drilled deeper than anyone before, and at 110 feet, their drill passed through a 4-inch layer of solid spruce logs, then a 2-inch layer of a putty-like substance, and then into open space. This cavity, which became known as the chapel vault, contained loose metal pieces that clinked together, and beneath that, their drill brought up a tiny, tantalizing link of gold chain. It was the first hard evidence of precious metal. The treasure seemed inches away. In a final, desperate gamble, they attempted to dig a new shaft right beside the original, planning to tunnel sideways into the vault. It was a catastrophic miscalculation. The walls of the new shaft, weakened by the relentless water flow, collapsed violently into the original money pit. Tons of earth and debris crashed down, burying the chapel vault, swallowing the gold chain's resting place, and hopelessly jumbling the original architecture. In their moment of near triumph, they had not been defeated by the builders' traps, but by the island's fragile geology. The collapse created a chaotic sinkhole known as the Money Pit Mud, a tangled graveyard of clues and timbers that would haunt every future searcher. The Truro Company proved the system's brilliance but also added a new layer of brutal irony. The greatest obstacle to solving the Oak Island mystery would eventually become the chaotic aftermath of those trying to solve it. The chaos left by the Truro Company did not deter the next generation of believers. If anything, the collapse made the treasure seem more real, its guardians more desperate to protect it. In 1861, as the American Civil War began to rage to the south, a new and more technologically ambitious syndicate formed on the quiet Canadian island. They called themselves the Oak Island Association, and they brought the Industrial Revolution to the money pit. Their weapon of choice was the steam engine. No longer would they rely on hand pumps and buckets to fight the Atlantic. They installed massive, chugging steam-powered pumps, their pistons hissing and groaning day and night in a determined war of engineering against the ancient flood tunnels. For a while, it seemed the modern age might finally triumph. The pumps lowered the water level enough for the men to descend back into the original, mangled shaft. They cleared debris and pushed deeper, past 100 feet, into territory no human had physically reached since the pit was first sealed. The air was thick with the smell of damp earth and coal smoke, a testament to human perseverance. Then, from a depth of over 100 feet, their drill brought up a new cluster of clues. Along with the usual wood chips and fragments of metal, the auger retrieved something delicate and utterly unexpected, a tiny, torn piece of parchment. It was no bigger than a fingernail, but its impact was electric. Here was potential proof that a document of some kind lay buried in the depths. Was it a treasure map detailing the locations of other caches? Could it be a legal deed, or perhaps even a sacred text, something so valuable it required this oceanic safe? The parchment fragment transformed the treasure from a pile of gold coins into a story, a secret someone needed to preserve not just from thieves but from time itself. It suggested knowledge was buried alongside wealth. Yet, as before, Oak Island demanded a price for this revelation. The syndicate's funds, drained by the colossal expense of running steam engines constantly, began to run dry. In a tragic echo of past failures, a new shaft they dug to bypass the flooding suddenly collapsed, swallowing months of progress and investment. The Oak Island Association, for all its steam-powered might, was ultimately defeated not by the sea, but by the very earth it sought to conquer and the relentless financial hemorrhage of the hunt. They added another chapter to the growing legend, one of technological hope and heartbreaking near misses, proving that even industrial power could be humbled by a 2-century-old puzzle. The relentless cycle of discovery and collapse only deepened the island's enigma. In 1897, a full century after the first dig, a new and bizarre feature was found that expanded the mystery far beyond a single hole in the ground. While probing the area around Smith's Cove, a workman's crowbar suddenly sank into soft earth, revealing a second, perfectly circular shaft. This was the cave-in pit, located 350 feet east of the original money pit. It was not a natural sinkhole. Its sides were lined with the same familiar, notched oak logs descending into darkness. Investigators quickly theorized this was a crucial component of the grand design, likely an air vent or a secondary access point for the sprawling flood tunnel network. Its discovery was a chilling revelation. The Oak Island project was not just a deep pit, it was an underground complex. The builders had not simply dug down, they had engineered an entire subterranean landscape with multiple chambers and channels spanning the length of several football fields. This monumental scale shattered the simple pirate narrative. What lone pirate captain or small crew could orchestrate such a vast, labor-intensive operation, requiring the skills of engineers, hydrologists, and an army of workers, all in total secrecy? The cave-in pit forced a fundamental rethink. If not pirates, then who, and for what purpose? New, more audacious theories began to take root. Some pointed to the Knights Templar, the legendary medieval order of warrior monks who vanished with their fabled treasure fleet. Could they have crossed the Atlantic, bringing sacred relics like the Ark of the Covenant or the Holy Grail to the New World, constructing this oceanic vault to protect them for all time? Others looked to pre-Columbian civilizations, suggesting advanced seafaring cultures from Europe or the Mediterranean might have reached Nova Scotia long before Columbus, leaving behind a coded deposit. Each theory tried to match a historical actor with the sheer ambition of the works. The flood tunnels mirrored sophisticated mining techniques from centuries past. The coconut fiber and eelgrass spoke of global trade or knowledge. Every new clue, like the cave-in pit, acted like a key that unlocked not a solution, but a new room full of doors. The treasure hunt was evolving into a historical detective story, where the identity of the builder became a prize as compelling as the chest of gold itself. The island was no longer just hiding a thing, it was hiding an entire story from history, one that someone was desperate to preserve. Even a future president could not resist the island's pull. In the summer of 1909, a young Franklin Delano Roosevelt, then a law student with a taste for adventure and history, sailed to Oak Island. He joined a syndicate called the Old Gold Salvage Group, investing his own money and his considerable curiosity into the search. For Roosevelt, this was not a mere diversion. It was the beginning of a lifelong fascination that would persist even as he guided a nation through the Great Depression and a world war. From the Oval Office, he would still receive updates on the dig, his mind occasionally wandering from affairs of state to that waterlogged pit in Nova Scotia. His involvement was a powerful endorsement, lending the mystery a new layer of credibility and glamour. If a man of such formidable intellect and later such immense responsibility believed the puzzle was real, then perhaps it truly was. The work of his group added more physical evidence to the growing pile. Their drilling operations, employing more refined equipment, brought up samples that echoed the past in a haunting chorus. From deep below, the drill bit retrieved not just more splinters of ancient oak, but also fragments of metal and, most intriguingly, another small piece of parchment, this one identified as sheepskin. These were not new revelations, but vital confirmations. They proved the earlier finds were not flukes or fabrications. The wood, the metal, the parchment, they were still down there waiting. The island was not done telling its story. Roosevelt's connection ensured that as the 20th century accelerated with automobiles and radio, the 18th century mystery remained alive in the public imagination. It became more than a local legend. It was now an American obsession, a tangible link to a hidden past that promised, with every tiny piece of sheepskin, that the next drill core might finally reveal everything. The 20th century brought machines and investors, but it could not strip away the danger. In 1959, a new kind of searcher arrived on Oak Island. Robert Ristall was not a wealthy speculator. He was a former daredevil motorcyclist and showman, a man of rugged determination and modest means. He moved his entire family to the island, living in a small trailer, treating the search not as a business venture but as a personal crusade. For 6 years, he and his teenage son, Bobby, along with a small, dedicated crew, worked with a methodical, almost archeological care. They eschewed the massive, destructive drilling of previous syndicates, preferring to clear old shafts by hand, mapping every timber and stone. Their patience was rewarded with curious finds, including an odd, flat stone formation near the shore, a perfect triangle of beach stones pointing inland, which they believed was a navigational marker left by the original builders. It was a clue that felt ancient and intentional, fueling their belief that they were close to deciphering the island's geometric code. The Ristalls represented the romantic heart of the treasure hunt, a family chasing a dream together, convinced that hard work and perseverance would unlock the secret where technology and money had failed. Then, on a hot August afternoon in 1965, the island's darkness reasserted itself. Robert was working at the bottom of a shallow shaft near the beach, a pit known as Borehole 10. Without warning, he was overcome by invisible fumes, likely a deadly mix of carbon dioxide and hydrogen sulfide that had accumulated in the confined, oxygen-poor space. He collapsed, seeing his father fall. Young Bobby, without a second thought, scrambled down the ladder to save him. He was immediately overcome as well. 2 other workers, Carl Greaser and Cyril Hiltz, followed in a desperate rescue attempt and met the same fate. In minutes, 4 men were dead. The Ristall tragedy was a seismic shock. It was no longer a story of flooded shafts or financial ruin. It was a story of a father and son perishing together in pursuit of a shadow. This event marked a profound and somber turn in the Oak Island legend. The mystery was no longer just an intellectual puzzle or an expensive hobby. It had exacted the ultimate human cost. The island's curse, once a figure of speech, now felt terribly real. It cast a long, mournful shadow over all future endeavors, a permanent reminder that some secrets are guarded not just by seawater and earth, but by a deadly, silent breath from the past itself. The tragedy at Borehole 10 did not end the hunt, it only deepened its solemn gravity. By the late 1960s, a new consortium was forming, one that aimed to apply rigorous science to the centuries-old legend. This was the Triton Alliance, a partnership between experienced treasure hunter David Tobias and a group of engineers and investors. They brought a methodical, almost corporate approach, surveying the entire island with ground-penetrating radar and sonar, treating Oak Island not as a folklore site but as an archaeological and engineering problem. Their most audacious project, however, would become the stuff of modern Oak Island legend, a massive drilled shaft they named Borehole 10X. Positioned northeast of the chaotic original Money Pit area, 10X was an engineering marvel in its own right. They used a massive rotary drill to bore a steel-lined shaft an astonishing 235 feet straight down, far deeper than any previous excavation had reached. The goal was to bypass the tangled wreckage of the original pit and the flood tunnels entirely, to probe the deep bedrock where the treasure vault was theorized to rest. In the summer of 1971, they lowered a waterproof camera into the murky, water-filled depths of 10X. What that grainy, black and white film allegedly showed would ignite a firestorm of controversy that burns to this day. At a depth of around 230 feet, the camera entered what appeared to be a large, natural cavern. The footage, flickering and indistinct, seemed to show several wooden chests with metal bands. Then the beam of the camera's light swept across something that made the observers gasp, what looked like a human hand, severed and floating in the water. In another frame, a darker, round shape was interpreted by some as a severed head. The implications were horrifying and electrifying. Had the builders left a guardian, a grim warning in the dark? Or was this evidence of a much darker chapter in the pit's history? The Triton Alliance was convinced they had finally found the treasure chamber and its macabre sentinel. But the images were of notoriously poor quality, blurred by silt and the distortion of water. Skeptics dismissed them as pareidolia, the human tendency to see familiar shapes in random patterns, suggesting the chests were just unusual rock formations and the hand merely a piece of driftwood. The debate raged, but one thing was undeniable: no one could physically get down there to check. Multiple dangerous attempts were made to dive into the narrow, unstable shaft, but the strong current and collapsing walls made it a death trap. Borehole 10X became the perfect symbol of the modern Oak Island dilemma, a marriage of high technology and tantalizing, unverifiable mystery. It offered the clearest glimpse anyone had ever claimed to have of the treasure, yet it remained forever out of reach, a phantom image on a flickering screen. It proved that even in the age of cameras and sonar, the island's final secret remained guarded by darkness, doubt, and the perilous nature of the search itself. While the images from Borehole 10X faded into unresolved legend, a new chapter was already being written by two brothers from Michigan. Rick and Marty Lagina had been captivated by the Oak Island mystery since childhood, after reading about it in a 1965 issue of Reader's Digest. For them, it was not just a story, it was a calling. In 2006, they transformed that lifelong fascination into action, purchasing a controlling interest in Oak Island Tours, the company that holds the rights to the treasure hunt. They were not typical treasure hunters, one a retired postal worker and the other a successful engineer and entrepreneur. But they brought something new to the table, a blend of passionate belief and systematic, analytical rigor. Their arrival marked a seismic shift, moving the search from the realm of private syndicates into the glare of the modern media age. Their partnership with the History Channel launched the Curse of Oak Island in 2014, transforming a niche historical puzzle into a global phenomenon watched by millions. Week after week, viewers were invited into the grind and glory of the search, sharing in every tantalizing clue and crushing setback. The show did more than document the hunt, it funded it. The revenue from the series financed an unprecedented level of exploration, turning Oak Island into a year-round, high-tech archaeological operation. The Lagina's approach is defined by a mantra, could it be? They employ a small army of experts from geoscientists to historians and deploy technology the original searchers could never have dreamed of. Ground-penetrating radar maps anomalies deep below the surface, sonar probes scan underwater structures, and massive excavators move Earth on a scale that would have stunned the Truro Company. They treat each clue as data, each theory as a hypothesis to be tested. This is the contemporary chapter of the Oak Island saga, characterized by big budgets, scientific tools, and relentless public scrutiny. Every drill core, every artifact pulled from the mud, is instantly analyzed and debated by a global audience. The brothers have unearthed compelling new evidence from centuries-old Spanish coins and a mysterious lead cross that may date to medieval times, to intricate wood structures and non-native materials that hint at sophisticated pre-Columbian activity. They have not found the treasure vault, but they have systematically built a stronger case than ever that something of immense historical significance was hidden here. The central question hanging over this modern era is profound. Will the combination of limitless passion, patient capital, and 21st century science finally be the key that unlocks a 200-year-old secret? Or will Oak Island, as it has for every generation before, reveal just enough to keep the dream alive while guarding its ultimate truth in the watery dark? The Lagina's search begins not with shovels but with a symphony of electronic pulses. To avoid the destructive mistakes of the past, they first listen to the island. Their primary tool is sonar, a technology that uses sound waves to paint a picture of the unseen. Boats equipped with side-scan sonar cruise the waters of Smith's Cove and the island's perimeter, sending acoustic pulses into the murk. When these pulses hit an object of buried timber, a stone structure, they bounce back, creating a detailed, ghostly image of the seabed and what lies just beneath it. This is how they confirmed the existence of the ancient box drains, not by digging up the entire beach, but by mapping their precise stone channels from the surface, revealing the true genius of the original engineering without moving a single grain of sand. On land, the technology grows even more sophisticated. They employ ground-penetrating radar, or GPR, which is like giving the island an X-ray. A technician pushes a cart across the ground, and it sends high-frequency radio waves into the earth. These waves reflect off changes in soil composition, voids, and buried objects, creating a cross-sectional map of the subsurface. It can reveal the outlines of old shafts, disturbed soil from long-ago digs, and anomalies that warrant a closer look. But to peer even deeper into the bedrock itself, they turn to seismic tomography. This method is akin to a geological CT scan. Workers plant small explosive charges or use a large plate that vibrates the ground. The shockwaves travel down through the layers of earth and rock, and an array of sensitive geophones measures how they bounce back. Powerful computers then assemble this data into a three-dimensional map of the island's very bones, showing pockets, caverns, and density variations hundreds of feet below. The result of all this scanning is a new vocabulary for the hunt, centered on one word: anomalies. These are the unexplained signatures deep in the data, the could-it-be moments made visible. The most compelling are often designated by letters and numbers, like anomaly 2X or the so-called hatch. The data describes them not as natural rock formations, but as large, man-shaped voids, sometimes with distinct right angles, resting at depths between 160 and 200 feet. Accompanying these voids are strong metal signatures, not the scattered fragments of old tools, but dense, concentrated hits that suggest large metallic objects. One such target, a massive void with a strong metal reading, sits directly in the legendary Money Pit area, precisely where the old accounts placed the chapel vault. This high-tech reconnaissance has fundamentally changed the game. Where 19th century searchers relied on guesswork, auger samples, and sheer luck, the modern team uses science to guide every single drill hole. They are not digging randomly, they are performing surgical strikes, aiming their massive excavation equipment at the coordinates provided by the ghosts in the machines. Each anomaly drilled is a test of history itself, an attempt to physically validate or finally debunk the stories of chests and flood tunnels that have fueled this obsession for centuries. The technology does not guarantee success, but it has replaced blind faith with targeted hope, proving that the island's deepest secrets may finally be yielding not to muscle but to mathematics. While technology peers deep into the earth, another mystery sits in plain sight, a murky 10-acre bog known simply as the Swamp. For centuries, it was dismissed as a natural wetland, an inconvenient patch of muck and mosquitoes on the island's southern shore. But what if it was never natural at all? The first clue is its shape. Viewed from above, the swamp is not an organic, amoeba-like blob. It is a near-perfect rectangle with sharp, 90-degree corners that defy the usual work of nature. Geometry like that does not happen by accident. It is a signature of human intention. Then came the finds. As teams began to probe its peaty depths, they uncovered a small, corroded coin. Analysis identified it as a Spanish 8 maravedis piece, dating from the 1600s. This was not a coin dropped by a 19th-century treasure hunter. This was an artifact from the very era when the money pit was likely constructed. It was a whisper from the builders themselves, left in the mud. Further investigations using sonar and core samples revealed something even more startling: the remains of a massive wooden structure buried deep beneath the centuries of accumulated peat. This was not driftwood, it was a carefully assembled framework of hand-hewn timbers, held together with wooden pegs in a style known as mortise and tenon, a construction technique used for ships and buildings for hundreds of years. This collection of evidence paints a radical new picture. The swamp, theorists now argue, was not a swamp at all when the builders were here. It was a covert engineering project, a hidden basin deliberately flooded to conceal its purpose. One compelling theory suggests it was a sheltered dock or shipway. A vessel could have been sailed into this rectangular lagoon, hidden from the open sea, where it could be unloaded in total secrecy, its precious cargo then transported to the waiting pit. Another idea posits it was a construction basin, used to build or repair the very ships that brought the treasure, or even to fabricate the complex components of the flood tunnel system itself. The fresh water from the island's interior would have been ideal for preserving timber and for the workers. This transforms our understanding of the Oak Island operation. It was not a handful of men digging a hole in the night. It was a sustained industrial-scale endeavor requiring a secure waterfront facility. The money pit was just the vault, the swamp was the hidden port that served it. Driven by this hypothesis, the modern hunt turned its machinery toward the bog. In a monumental operation, they constructed a network of cofferdams, steel walls driven into the earth to hold back the water, and began pumping the swamp dry. For the first time in hundreds of years, sunlight hit the ancient, spongy floor. Excavators then began the careful, messy work of peeling back the layers of peat, a process like turning the pages of a waterlogged history book. What they found confirmed a hive of activity. They uncovered more structured wood, pathways made of carefully laid stones, and a plethora of artifacts, from hand-wrought nails and tools to more exotic items like a decorative piece of lead that may have come from a centuries-old book binding. Each object was a data point, suggesting not a fleeting visit but a prolonged, organized settlement. The swamp was revealing itself as a center of operations, a work camp for the anonymous architects of the mystery. This means the treasure hunt is no longer just about a single shaft, it is about an entire hidden landscape. The money pit might be the climax of the story, but the swamp is where the plot was hatched and the characters lived and worked. Every timber pulled from the peat asks the same haunting question: what kind of project demands not just a deep hole, but an entire secret harbor to support it? The physical evidence scattered across Oak Island tells a story in fragments, a cryptic inventory left behind by its builders. Each artifact, from the grand to the granular, is a piece of a puzzle that refuses to fit together neatly. The very first clue was not gold, but a botanical import. The coconut fiber matting discovered beneath Smith's Cove is a geographical fingerprint. Coconuts do not grow in Nova Scotia, they are a tropical commodity. Its presence in such vast quantities suggests a ship or ships that had sailed far southern routes, perhaps from the Caribbean or even the coast of Africa, stopping here to unload not just treasure, but the very materials needed to build its defense. Next, the legendary 90-foot stone, though now lost, represents the idea of communication. Whether its symbols truly spelled out a promise of treasure or were simple mason's marks, its existence points to literate, organized builders who may have left instructions or warnings encoded in stone. Then there are the parchment fragments, tiny and fragile, pulled from the deep darkness by drill bits. Their mere existence is profound. They imply documents were placed in the vault, elevating the deposit from mere bullion to a potential archive of lost knowledge, a library sealed in clay and seawater. A more tangible link to the age of exploration is the Spanish 8 maravedis coin found in the swamp. Dated to the 1600s, it is a silent witness to the era of galleons and conquest, whispering that someone from that world walked here and possibly dropped it while engaged in a monumental task. Perhaps the most visually striking and controversial find in recent years is the lead cross. Discovered in the soil near the shore, its simple, folded design is reminiscent of medieval pilgrim badges. Initial analysis suggested its metal composition was consistent with lead mined centuries before Columbus sailed. If verified, it is a seismic clue, pointing not to pirates or Spanish sailors, but to visitors from a much older Europe, perhaps monks or knights traversing the Atlantic long before it was thought possible. Beyond these headline items lies a quieter stratum of everyday life: broken pottery shards, animal bones from meals, and hand-wrought iron tools like axes and nails. These are the artifacts of a camp, not a quick burial. They speak of people living and working on this island for an extended period, building, eating, and persisting through the seasons. A collection of human bones found in various locations adds a somber, personal dimension, suggesting this endeavor had its casualties even among the original crew. So what does this catalog tell us? No single chest of glittering treasure has been hauled to the surface, but this assemblage is arguably more fascinating. It paints a portrait of a complex multinational operation. The coconut fiber and Spanish coin hint at global maritime networks. The lead cross and parchment suggest a cultural or religious dimension. The tools and bones confirm a sustained, labor-intensive human presence. Together, they form an archeological argument that something of extraordinary importance happened here, an event that drew resources and people from across the ocean and left behind a scattered trail of their passage. The treasure, then, may not be a single hoard, but the historical truth these objects collectively guard. A story written not on parchment, but in coconut, lead, bone, and stone. This ingenious network of tunnels is the single greatest engineering marvel on Oak Island. The prevailing theory, built on the discoveries at Smith's Cove, describes a system of breathtaking cunning. It begins with those 5 stone-lined box drains buried beneath the artificial beach. These drains act as collectors, funneling seawater through a filtering mat of eelgrass and coconut fiber. The channels then converge into a single, larger tunnel, a stone-lined aqueduct that runs over 500 feet inland, sloping gently downward. Its destination is the bottom of the main treasure shaft. The principle is simple but devastating: hydrostatic pressure. The entrance at the cove is at sea level, but the outlet inside the money pit is over 100 feet below that. This difference in height creates a powerful siphon, a relentless flow that, the moment the final barrier is breached, turns the pit into a well that refills with every high tide. It is not just a trap, it is a permanent hydraulic lock. For over 2 centuries, defeating this system has been the defining battle of the treasure hunt. Searchers have tried everything. They have poured dyes like fluorescein into the pit, watching in frustration as the colored water seeped out through multiple points along the shoreline, proving the network was vast and complex, not a single pipe. In a more violent approach, they have set off dynamite charges deep in the shafts, hoping the concussive blast would collapse the tunnels. The earth shook, but the water kept coming. The most ambitious attempt was the construction of a massive cofferdam, a wall of sheet piling driven into the seabed to encircle all of Smith's Cove, aiming to cut off the ocean at its source. It was a monumental effort, but the Atlantic, with its storms and relentless pressure, eventually defeated the dam as it has defeated every static barrier. Yet there is a compelling counter-argument, a natural explanation known as the welling theory. This suggests the water is not from engineered tunnels, but from a natural, pressurized freshwater aquifer trapped deep in the island's limestone bedrock. When searchers dig deep enough, they puncture this layer, and the water, under immense geological pressure, wells up from below, appearing as if from the sea. Proponents point out that the water in the deep shafts is often brackish, a mix of salt and fresh, which could result from this underground source mingling with seawater through natural fissures. This theory challenges the very idea of an ancient booby trap. So which is it, a masterpiece of intentional flooding or a cruel accident of geology? The evidence is maddeningly mixed. The clearly man-made box drains at Smith's Cove argue strongly for human design, but the inability to completely stop the flow, even with modern technology, suggests forces beyond simple channeling. Perhaps the truth is a combination that the original builders discovered and then enhanced a natural water feature, using their stone tunnels to direct and guarantee a flood they knew nature could provide. Regardless of its origin, the water's effect is absolute. It has bankrupted syndicates, ruined machinery, and forced every excavation to become a desperate race against the rising tide. This relentless obstacle is what truly defines the Oak Island mystery. It implies the builders did not just want to hide their treasure, they wanted to make it functionally unreachable. They engineered not just a secret but a curse, a guardian that would outlast empires and outsmart centuries. To protect something so permanently, they must have believed it was worth protecting forever. What could possibly warrant such a final, watery sentence? The most enduring face of the Oak Island mystery wears an eye patch and flies a Jolly Roger. For generations, the pirate theory has been the default romantic explanation. It is a story that feels right, a tale of stolen gold, secret maps, and chests buried under a lone oak tree. Among the pantheon of pirate suspects, 2 names tower over the rest: Captain William Kidd and the infamous Edward Teach, better known as Blackbeard. Both men sailed these waters and both left behind legends of hidden wealth. Captain Kidd was a privateer turned pirate, executed in London in 1701. On the gallows, he supposedly offered a deal, spare his life, and he would lead authorities to a treasure worth £100,000, buried somewhere in the North American colonies. He was hanged anyway, but the story of Kidd's vast, unclaimed loot took on a life of its own, attaching itself to every promising coastline from New England to the Caribbean. Blackbeard's legend is even more dramatic. In 1718, just before his final battle, he is said to have boasted that only he and the devil knew where his treasure was hidden. The historical record does place pirate activity in the region of Nova Scotia in the early 1700s. The waters around Oak Island were a secluded haven, perfect for careening ships for repairs or laying low after a raid. It is entirely plausible that a pirate crew, laden with plunder, might have sought a safe place to stash their goods, intending to return later. The initial discovery of a ship's pulley block hanging from the oak tree fits this narrative perfectly, a marker left to aid in the treasure's retrieval. The logic is seductively simple. Pirates buried treasure. Oak Island has a treasure pit, therefore pirates built it. Yet when you hold this theory against the physical reality of the island, it begins to unravel at the seams. Consider the sheer scale and sophistication of the works. The flood tunnel system is not a simple ditch. It is a multi-stage hydraulic engine requiring precise surveying, stone masonry, and an understanding of hydrostatic pressure. The artificial beach at Smith's Cove alone represents months of coordinated labor by a large, disciplined crew. Then there is the depth of the main shaft itself, over 100 feet, lined with notched oak logs at precise intervals. This is not a 3-foot hole dug in a panic. Pirates were seamen, not civil engineers. Their modus operandi when they did bury treasure was for quick, shallow concealment in a familiar spot, like a sand dune or a recognizable cluster of rocks, something that could be retrieved easily and swiftly. They were men on the run, not a construction battalion. Would a pirate captain with a restless crew and naval patrols on the horizon really commit to a multi-year engineering project? Would he trust his men to keep such an elaborate secret? And perhaps most damningly, if this was a pirate bank, why did no one ever come back for the deposit? Neither Kidd nor Blackbeard lived to a ripe old age, but their surviving crewmates certainly did. If the treasure was known to them, the lure of such wealth would have been irresistible. The silence of history, the complete lack of any pirate's deathbed confession or map pointing directly to Oak Island speaks volumes. The pirate theory provides a compelling cast of characters and a motive we can all understand: greed. But it struggles to account for the overwhelming evidence of monumental, patient, and technically brilliant construction. It answers the why, but fails miserably at the how. This glaring mismatch is precisely what has forced historians and enthusiasts to look beyond the skull and crossbones, toward builders whose ambitions and capabilities were as vast as the works they left behind. The treasure, it seems, required a different kind of mastermind. But if not pirates, then perhaps soldiers. Another compelling theory shifts the timeline forward by a century and swaps out lawless rogues for the disciplined ranks of the British Empire. This idea suggests the money pit is not a pirate's bank, but a royal vault constructed by British military engineers during a time of national emergency, either the American Revolution or the War of 1812. The logic is strategic. As American forces threatened British holdings in Nova Scotia, the Royal Navy would have needed an absolutely secure location to protect something of immense value. Perhaps even the contents of the British Treasury itself, or the massive payroll for their troops and fleet. Oak Island, secluded yet close to the vital Halifax naval base, would have been perfect. Its location offered natural secrecy, while its geography allowed for controlled engineering. Who better to execute such a monumental, clandestine project than the British Army's Corps of Royal Engineers? These were the premier military architects of their age, masters of siege works, fortifications, and complex logistics. The precision of the Oak Island works, from the geometrically perfect box drains to the deep, timber-reinforced shaft, fits their profile perfectly. This was not haphazard digging, it was textbook military engineering, the kind used to build secure magazines and protected water supplies. Even the materials hint at a naval connection. The vast amounts of coconut fiber found in the flood tunnel filter system is a key piece of evidence. In the 18th and 19th centuries, coconut fiber, known as coir, was a standard material used in the caulking of British naval vessels, stuffed between the planks of ships' hulls to make them watertight. Its presence on Oak Island in such quantity could point directly to the Royal Navy, which would have had ready access to ship loads of the material. The entire system feels defensive, a permanent, booby-trapped strongbox designed to safeguard a national fortune from capture. The theory elegantly answers the how, attributing the sophisticated engineering to one of the few organizations on the continent with the skill, manpower, and discipline to pull it off. Yet, for all its plausibility, the military theory faces its own historical hurdles. If this was an official British operation, why is there no record of it? The British military was famously meticulous in its record-keeping, especially for expenditures of this scale. The movement of treasury funds or army payrolls was documented to the penny. No such orders, no requests for materials, no after-action reports mentioning a massive excavation on Oak Island have ever surfaced in the archives. Furthermore, if British forces abandoned the vault in haste, why did they never return? After the War of 1812, Britain remained in control of Halifax for decades. They had every opportunity to quietly retrieve their own treasure. The absence of any military artifacts like uniform buttons, regimental insignia, or distinctive tools from that specific era in the diggings is also puzzling. While a few old coins have been found, none are definitively linked to a British military payroll cache, which would likely have contained newly minted coins in large, standardized quantities. The military theory provides a brilliant engineer but lacks the paper trail and the smoking gun. It suggests a project of state secrecy so absolute that it vanished from history itself, leaving only a flooded hole in the ground as its monument. This raises a haunting possibility. What if the greatest secret buried on Oak Island is not gold, but the truth about why a powerful empire felt it had to hide its most valuable assets and then erase all knowledge of the deed? Yet the most captivating theory of all reaches back even further into the shadowy halls of medieval Europe. This is the Knights Templar theory, a story that connects a flooded pit in Canada to the fall of a legendary holy order. The Knights Templar were not just warriors, they were the bankers and guardians of Christendom during the Crusades. By the early 14th century, their power and wealth had made them dangerous enemies. On Friday, the 13th of October, 1307, King Philip IV of France moved against them, ordering the arrest of Templars across Europe on charges of heresy and blasphemy. The order was dissolved, its leaders burned at the stake, and its vast treasury, accumulated over 2 centuries, vanished without a trace. Legends say that before the arrests, a fleet of Templar ships slipped away from the French port of La Rochelle, carrying the order's most sacred relics and its fabled wealth to an unknown destination. Could that destination have been Oak Island? Proponents of this theory weave a compelling tapestry of clues. They point to the mysterious symbols reportedly carved on the lost 90-foot stone, interpreting them not as a simple treasure message, but as coded Templar iconography or Masonic ciphers passed down from the order. The small lead cross found on the island, with its simple, folded design, is seen as a classic Templar pilgrim's badge, a personal token of faith dropped by a knight centuries ago. Even the coconut fiber takes on new meaning, suggesting a voyage that spanned the tropical Atlantic. The theory gained modern momentum with a controversial piece of evidence known as the Zena-Halpern map. This document, presented by a researcher in the 1980s, purports to be a copy of a medieval chart showing a landmass labeled Oak Island, and featuring symbols associated with the Templars and with the Norse, hinting at a fusion of ancient voyages. While most academics dismiss the map as a modern creation, its narrative power is undeniable. It frames Oak Island not as a colonial-era bank, but as a sacred ark, a final refuge for treasures like the Holy Grail or even the Ark of the Covenant, objects of such immense spiritual significance that an entire island would be engineered to conceal them forever. This idea taps into a broader, thrilling narrative of pre-Columbian transatlantic contact, the possibility that medieval Europeans crossed the ocean long before Columbus. It suggests the Templars, with their extensive nautical experience from managing pilgrim traffic, had the maps and the skill to make such a journey, finding a new world where they could protect their legacy from a world that had turned against them. The theory is, by its nature, highly speculative. There is no definitive historical document placing Templar ships in Nova Scotia. The archaeological evidence is circumstantial, open to multiple interpretations. Yet, its hold on the modern imagination is immense. It elevates the treasure hunt from a search for gold to a quest for holy relics. transforming the money pit from a strongbox into a potential tomb for the sacred secrets of the West. It answers the why with a motive beyond greed, a motive of preservation and faith. The sheer scale and genius of the Oak Island works suddenly makes sense if you believe they were built not by pirates or soldiers, but by the last knights of a fallen empire, using the final reserves of their order's knowledge to hide something they considered more valuable than all the gold on Earth. Whether fact or folklore, the Templar theory asks us the most profound question of all. What could possibly be important enough to bury so well that the world would search for it for 200 years and still come up empty-handed? The British military theory has a compelling rival, one that shifts the blame across the English Channel. As the British Empire tightened its grip on North America in the mid-1800s, another European power was facing a desperate final stand. This is the French royal treasure theory, a narrative woven from the fall of an empire and the frantic need to save its crown jewels. The stage is the 7 Years' War, a global conflict known in America as the French and Indian War. By 1758, the tide had turned decisively against France. The mighty fortress of Louisbourg, the Gibraltar of the North Atlantic and the guardian of French Canada, fell to a massive British siege. With the heart of New France pierced, the path was open for the British to advance on Quebec and Montreal. In this atmosphere of impending collapse, French officials faced a terrifying question: what to do with the royal treasury and the accumulated wealth of the colony. Letting it fall into British hands was unthinkable. They needed a hiding place, one so secure the enemy could never find it, even if they conquered every fort and city. And they needed engineers capable of building a vault worthy of a king's ransom. Louisbourg itself provides the perfect answer to both. The fortress was a masterpiece of military engineering designed by France's finest architects. Its sappers and engineers were experts in excavation, tunneling, and complex construction. More importantly, Louisbourg is less than 200 miles from Oak Island by sea, a manageable voyage for a covert mission under cover of darkness or fog. The theory proposes that in the chaotic months after Louisbourg's fall, but before the final surrender of New France in 1760, a loyal contingent of French engineers and soldiers was dispatched with the treasury. Their orders: bury it where the British would never look, and build a trap so formidable it would guard the wealth until France could reclaim its colonies. The engineering on Oak Island fits this scenario with eerie precision. The flood tunnel system is not unlike the sophisticated countermine galleries and waterworks built into European fortresses of the era. The meticulous stonework of the box drains mirrors the masonry of Louisbourg's own formidable walls. This was work done not by pirates, but by a corps of professionals acting under official, if secret, orders. So where is the evidence? Proponents point to artifacts that could have a French connection, from old hand-wrought iron tools consistent with 18th century French blacksmithing to the style of some recovered woodworking. The historical timing is impeccable, placing the construction squarely in a window of panic and capability. It also solves the why no return problem that plagues the pirate theory. France lost the war and its North American claims permanently, leaving the treasure guardians stranded by history, their secret dying with them. Yet, like all theories, it has cracks. No surviving French document, memoir, or military log mentions such an audacious mission. The evacuation of a royal treasury would have been a monumental logistical feat, and its absence from any record is puzzling. Furthermore, while some artifacts are consistent with the period, none bear a definitive French royal stamp or insignia. The theory also must contend with the coconut fiber, a material not typically associated with French naval stores of the time, which were more likely to use oakum, a tarred hemp fiber. The French theory is historically grounded and elegantly explains the skill behind the works, but it struggles with the same silence that haunts the British theory. It presents a poignant picture, loyal engineers performing one last duty for a dying empire, creating a tomb for wealth that would fund a resurgence that never came. In the end, it stands as a powerful and often overlooked contender, a reminder that the true builder of Oak Island may not have been a rogue or a knight, but a servant of a crown, executing a final, brilliant act of defiance against the relentless march of history. The true treasure of Oak Island may not be gold, but the sheer volume of money that has vanished into its soil. For over 2 centuries, the pursuit of wealth has functioned as a spectacularly efficient engine for destroying it. Conservative estimates, when adjusted for inflation, place the total expenditure by all the various syndicates, from the Onslow Company to the modern Lagina brothers operation, well into the tens of millions of dollars. This figure encompasses everything: the back-breaking manual labor of the 1800s, the steam engines and dynamite of the industrial age, the high-tech sonar and seismic surveys of today, and the repeated purchase of the island's treasure rights themselves. It is a river of capital that has flowed in one direction only, straight down. The return on this colossal investment, in purely monetary terms, is absolute zero. Not a single coin of proven treasure has been banked. This creates a profound and ironic paradox. The hunt for unimaginable riches has consistently consumed fortunes, turning the money pit into a financial black hole whose gravitational pull on money is far more demonstrable than its pull on pirate chests. This cycle of expenditure has, however, created a secondary economy on the shores of Nova Scotia. The local communities around Mahone Bay have long experienced a boom and bust rhythm tied directly to the treasure hunt. When a new syndicate forms, flush with investor optimism, money floods into the area. Local workers are hired, equipment is rented, supplies are purchased, and accommodations are filled. The island becomes a hive of activity, injecting life and cash into the region. But when the syndicate inevitably exhausts its funds or its hope, the activity ceases. The workers are laid off, the machines fall silent, and the economic pulse slows to a crawl, leaving the community waiting for the next group of believers to arrive with a new map and a fresh bankroll. For generations, the legend has provided not a discovered fortune, but an intermittent livelihood, a local industry built entirely on a dream. This relentless financial hemorrhage raises a haunting question about human nature. Is the 200-year saga a testament to indefatigable perseverance, or is it a chronicle of collective folly? The money spent represents more than cash. It represents lifetimes of labor, innovation, and hope. Each dollar spent is a vote of confidence in the mystery, a bet placed against overwhelming odds. From this perspective, the search is a monument to our capacity for belief and our refusal to surrender to the unknown. Yet from another angle, it mirrors the logic of a gambler who, having lost a fortune, doubles down to win it back, convinced the next dig will be the one. The pit consumes resources with the promise of a future payoff that never arrives, a perfect engine of sunk cost fallacy. Perhaps the ultimate lesson of Oak Island's economics is not about treasure but about value. It demonstrates what we are willing to invest, not in gold, but in the possibility of a story being true, in the chance that history has a secret waiting just for us. The real fortune lost and found on that island is not measured in coins, but in the enduring human currency of curiosity and wonder. That same curiosity, however, has never been confined to the muddy pits and swampy shores of the island itself. The Oak Island mystery has long since escaped its geographical bounds, spilling over into books, screens, and the collective imagination to become a full-fledged cultural phenomenon. The first major conduit for this was the written word. In 1958, a Nova Scotia lawyer and longtime treasure hunter named Reginald Victor Harris published the Oak Island Mystery. This book was not just another retelling, it was a seminal work that meticulously compiled 2 centuries of reports, letters, and first-hand accounts into a single, compelling narrative. Harris gave the legend a spine of documented fact, transforming scattered local tales into a coherent historical puzzle that could be studied, debated, and pursued. His work became the Bible for a new generation of searchers, from the Lagina brothers to countless armchair detectives. It proved that the story had the depth and complexity to support serious inquiry. Following Harris, a flood of other books arrived, each offering new theories from the plausible to the fantastical, ensuring the mystery remained alive on library shelves and in late-night reading sessions. Then came the documentaries, television specials that brought the haunting landscape and the tantalizing clues into living rooms across the world. These programs presented the evidence with a sense of gravity and wonder, framing the search as a real-life adventure story. But the true cultural tipping point arrived in 2014 with the History Channel series, The Curse of Oak Island. This show did something unprecedented. It turned the long, slow, often frustrating process of historical investigation into must-see television. Week after week, viewers were not just told about the mystery, they were invited into the war room to hear the theories. They stood at the edge of the drilling platform to await the core samples, and they felt the crushing disappointment of another flooded tunnel. The series created a global fan base, a community of millions who analyze every find in online forums, dissect every scan, and debate every theory with the passion of sports fans. It spawned a cottage industry of YouTube commentators, podcasters, and independent researchers, all adding their voices to the chorus of speculation. This media engine has, in turn, transformed Oak Island from a remote, privately owned piece of land into a pilgrimage site. Today, the island welcomes tourists through Oak Island Tours Inc., offering guided excursions that walk visitors through the key sites, from the famous Money Pit area to the mysterious swamp. There is a museum and interpretive center on the mainland, filled with artifacts and models where the curious can see a piece of the 8 Maravedis coin or examine a replica of the 90-foot stone. The local economy of Mahone Bay now thrives in part on this legend-driven tourism, with shops, restaurants, and accommodations catering to those drawn by the story. What began as a strange depression noticed by a teenage boy has evolved into a modern myth, a self-sustaining narrative machine. The media feeds the public's fascination. The public's fascination justifies more media, and the ongoing search provides fresh chapters for the never-ending story. The treasure itself remains elusive, but the cultural treasure, the enduring legend of a puzzle that defies solution, has already been found, shared, and amplified to a volume that those original builders, hiding their secret in silence, could never have possibly imagined. But for every believer captivated by the legend, there is a skeptic armed with a simpler, more earthly explanation. The grand narrative of Oak Island, they argue, is not a historical mystery, but a classic case of a myth that grew in the telling, layered over a perfectly ordinary natural feature. Their counter-argument begins with the water itself, the very heart of the supposed booby trap. Geologist Robert Dunfield, who conducted extensive excavations in the 1960s, championed the natural aquifer theory, often called the welling. He proposed that the island sits atop a porous layer of limestone bedrock. Deep underground, fresh water from the island's interior becomes pressurized. When a shaft is dug deep enough to puncture this layer, the water surges upward, mixing with seawater that naturally infiltrates through cracks and fissures from the surrounding bay. The result is not a man-made flood tunnel, but a natural artesian well. The brackish water, the relentless flow, the failure of every attempt to block it, all fit this geological model perfectly. It suggests the original diggers simply had the spectacular bad luck to hit a high-pressure water source, and every generation since has misinterpreted that misfortune as ancient genius. The very origin story of the Money Pit itself comes under scrutiny. The tale of Daniel Maginnis and the hanging pulley block in 1795 was not written down until decades after the fact. Skeptics like investigator Joe Nickel point out glaring inconsistencies in the early accounts. The details of the oak platforms, their precise depths and spacing, changed with each retelling. There is no contemporary documentation, No diary entries or local newspaper reports from the 1790s describing this remarkable discovery. The story, they contend, bears the hallmarks of folklore, embellished over time to explain a curious depression that was likely just an old, collapsed sinkhole, perhaps from a long-forgotten attempt to dig a well or a root cellar. Into this natural hole, centuries of debris could have fallen, wood from trees, stones from field clearing, even bits of metal from passing ships or early settlers, creating the layered effect that later searchers would interpret as deliberate platforms. This skepticism extends to the famous artifacts, the very clues that fuel the treasure narrative. The 90-foot stone is the prime example. With no photograph and the original stone lost, its existence and cryptic inscription rely entirely on second-hand reports from interested treasure hunters. Its translation promising £2 million is simply too perfect, too directly tailored to the searcher's dream. The parchment fragments pulled up by drill bits are another point of contention. Could they have been contamination, a piece of a later worker's lunch wrapper or a document accidentally dropped into the shaft during the chaotic 19th century excavations? Even the gold chain link and the Spanish coin, while genuine artifacts, prove only that old objects can be found on an island visited by people for centuries, not that they were part of a singular, immense deposit. From this perspective, Oak Island is not a locked vault but an archaeological palimpsest, a site where natural geology and 200 years of frantic, destructive treasure hunting have jumbled together to create the illusion of a grand design. The real curse, the debunkers conclude, is not a supernatural guardian, but the powerful human desire to find patterns and purpose where none may exist. For a mystery to be truly compelling, it must survive this kind of rigorous doubt, standing firm not just on hope, but on evidence that can silence the simplest explanations. From the very beginning, the soil of Oak Island has been sown with legal disputes as deeply as it is with oak timbers. The story of who owns the dream has been almost as contentious as the search itself. It began simply enough with the three discoverers, Daniel Maginnis, John Smith, and Anthony Vaughan, each taking ownership of different lots on the island after their initial dig. For decades, these founding families and their descendants formed the backbone of every early syndicate, their property rights providing the legal foundation for the hunt. But as the stakes grew higher with each tantalizing clue, so did the complexity of the partnerships. The formation of each new company, from the Onslow Company to the Truro Company, required intricate treasure trove licenses, contracts that granted the right to search for treasure on the land in exchange for a promised share of the find. These documents were often riddled with vague language and conflicting clauses, setting the stage for future battles. The central, burning question was always the same: who gets what if or when the treasure is finally lifted from the pit? This question has sparked lawsuits that have stalled shovels for years. One of the most bitter legal wars erupted in the 20th century between two titans of the modern search. Fred Nolan, a sharp-eyed surveyor who believed the treasure was hidden elsewhere on the island based on mysterious stone markers he found, and Robert Dunfield, the geologist who believed in brute force excavation. Their feud over land access and drilling rights escalated into a decades-long court battle, complete with accusations of trespassing and even the alleged sabotage of equipment. At one point, Nolan famously strung a cable across a road to block Dunfield's bulldozers, a physical barricade mirroring the legal ones. These conflicts were not just about ego, they were about control of the narrative and the potential fortune. Every lawsuit drained money and morale, turning allies into adversaries and proving that the island's curse could manifest in courtrooms as easily as in flooded shafts. The current ownership structure is itself a delicate web of treaties, a testament to this long history of conflict. Today, the majority of Oak Island is controlled by Oak Island Tours, Inc., a partnership primarily owned by the Lagina brothers, Rick and Marty, and the family of the late Dan Blankenship, a treasure hunter who dedicated over 50 years of his life to the search. This partnership holds the exclusive treasure rights license from the province of Nova Scotia. The province itself retains a significant interest, as any treasure found must be reported and is subject to a division, with a percentage going to the finders and the rest to the province as the landowner. This modern arrangement is the result of over 2 centuries of hard-learned lessons, an attempt to balance private enterprise with public interest. Yet, even this system is not immune to tension, as seen in occasional negotiations over license renewals and the precise definitions of what constitutes a treasure trove under the law. These legal entanglements have formed a parallel obstacle course to the physical one. While engineers wrestle with flood tunnels, lawyers have wrestled with contract law. A promising dig has often been halted not by a rush of seawater, but by a cease and desist order. The search has been paused for depositions, land surveys, and injunction hearings, sometimes for years at a time. This adds a profound layer of human conflict to the saga. The island's guardians are not just geological formations and ancient traps, they are also property lines, inherited grievances, and the fierce, sometimes destructive, passion of those who believe the prize is rightfully theirs. It reveals a universal truth: the desire for a legendary treasure can divide people as powerfully as it can unite them. The legal battles are a reminder that the treasure, if it exists, does not lie in a vacuum. It waits at the center of a complex web of human ambition, ownership, and law. A web that has proven just as difficult to navigate as the flooded tunnels below. Perhaps the most valuable thing ever buried on Oak Island is not a chest but a question. Why does this single, stubborn hole in the ground command such relentless devotion? The answer lies not in the soil but in the human psyche. The money pit is the ultimate unsolved puzzle, and our brains are wired to solve puzzles. It presents a challenge with clear rules, tantalizing clues, and a promised reward, activating the same parts of our mind that delight in a complex riddle or a suspenseful detective story. Every piece of coconut fiber, every symbol on a lost stone, is a piece of the game, and we are desperate to see the picture completed. It is an adventure story we can step into, a real-life treasure map where X literally marks a spot, and the possibility of being the one to finally connect the dots is an intoxicating dream. This is not just about greed, it is about conquest, about the triumph of curiosity over confusion. We see ourselves in those early diggers, feeling that same jolt of excitement when the drill brings up a fragment of parchment, that same stubborn refusal to quit when the seawater rushes in. The saga is a 200-year testament to hope and resilience, a monument to the human capacity to endure failure after failure for the sake of a single, glorious what if. That question is the engine of the entire endeavor. What if the next drill core hits the vault? What if the next scan reveals the final chamber? What if everything we believed is true? This perpetual state of potential is far more powerful than any certainty. A solved mystery is a closed book, but an open one is an invitation to imagine, to project our own stories onto the blank spaces. We are not just observing a treasure hunt, we are participating in a collective daydream. The history of exploration is littered with similar quests that burned brightly in the imagination long after they faded from maps. Think of El Dorado, the mythical city of gold that drew conquistadors into the heart of the jungle. They never found a golden city, but they found continents. The quest itself, the burning desire to see what lies beyond the known horizon, drove discovery. The Holy Grail is another perfect analogy, a sacred object that is less about a physical cup and more about the transformative journey of the seeker. The knights who searched for it were changed by the quest itself, their values tested and their spirits refined. Oak Island functions in the same symbolic space. The tangible result has been a sequence of financial ruins and flooded shafts, a ledger of undeniable failure. Yet the intangible dream, the story of the quest, has yielded immense riches of inspiration, of community, and of endless fascination. It is a story that mirrors our own deepest drives, our need to seek, to solve, and to believe that just beyond the next obstacle, something wondrous awaits. The true treasure of Oak Island, then, may have been unearthed long ago. It is the epic narrative itself, a sprawling, unfinished novel written in mud, seawater, and human ambition. It is a reflection of our own spirit, forever digging, forever hoping, forever captivated by the beautiful, maddening possibility that lies just beneath the surface. From a teenager's curious discovery to a global obsession fueled by television, the Oak Island saga is an epic without an ending. We have traced the journey from simple shovels striking oak platforms to the hum of seismic scanners mapping voids deep in the bedrock. We have marveled at the ingenious, cruel flood tunnels, a hydraulic lock engineered to guard its secret with the entire Atlantic Ocean. We have held our breath over tiny, fragile clues, a scrap of parchment, a link of gold chain, a lead cross whispering of distant times. We have felt the weight of tragedy, the lives lost to invisible fumes and collapsing earth, a somber reminder of the hunt's human cost. And we have wandered through a forest of theories, from pirate kings and fallen knights to desperate empires, each trying to claim the genius behind the pit. The central question now hangs in the air, thick as the fog over Mahone Bay. Will it ever truly be solved? And perhaps more intriguingly, do we even want it to be? A definitive answer, a chest hauled into the sunlight and catalogued, would close the book. It would satisfy a logistical curiosity, but it might extinguish the magnificent flame of mystery that has burned for over 2 centuries. The power of Oak Island has never been in a pile of gold, but in the endless possibility of it. It is a story we have all helped to tell, a collective daydream of hidden maps and ancient codes. This waterlogged pit in Nova Scotia is, in the end, a monument to something far more profound than buried treasure. It is a monument to the human spirit's relentless, costly, and magnificent capacity for wonder. It celebrates the part of us that looks at a hole in the ground and sees not an empty space, but a story waiting to be finished, a puzzle begging to be solved, a call to adventure that echoes across generations. What do you think lies at the bottom of the money pit, or is the search itself the real discovery? Share your theories in the comments below, and subscribe for more deep dives into the greatest enigmas history has ever buried.